Just a quick introduction to tell you why I'm here giving this talk. So since 2009, I've been making a bunch of games in various genres across various platforms. But more importantly, I wanted to share a set of just principles that I employ while making games that I feel are useful to everyone. Even if you're working as part of a major studio or if you just have a handful of person in your independent developer team. So I worked on 5 release games, 4 of which were for my own studio called Pterodactyl Games. And just a general introduction to you guys, who the target audience for this talk is. So if you have a game idea, but you're struggling to figure out, okay, how do I actually take this idea and turn it into a finished game, right? Or you can make small prototypes. I know a lot of people who can prototype an idea fairly quickly, but struggle to get it past the finish line, like let's say on Steam or on the App Store, right? Or you're already an established developer, but you're looking for ways to optimize your process. Like, okay, what are a few tips and tricks I can use that helps me make my games more efficiently? So this is a very official looking chart about the game development production pipeline. So generally we divide our pipeline into 3 parts: pre-production, production and post-production. So I'm going to talk about each of these phases and what I do in them that helps me get past the finish line that much more efficiently. So I'm going to start with pre-production. That's usually the preparation phase. You know, the part where you're still figuring out, okay, how do I go from idea to a finished game? So the first phase that we usually have when we start making a game is the concept phase. You know, that's where usually we come up with a design document, or we just like mock up a simple Google document sheet and we're like, okay, this is our game idea. Now, one thing which we can do in this thing is to first write it down in excruciating detail. So, you know, instead of just saying, okay, I want to make an RTS that's set in the future, why not let's break down how many civilizations are going to be in that RTS? What types of gameplay are we looking at, right? What mechanics are we going to explore in that game, right? And then we divide everything into 3 parts. Very simple. You divide these features into essential, nice to have, and pipe dream. So how this works is, let's say you have a Google document of your game and you've listed all the major features that you want, just color code them. So essential features are obviously the features without which your game would not exist. Like if you want to build an RTS, maybe you want unit placement in there, unit selection, the basics, right? Nice to have features are features which would make your game stand out just a little bit more, which is very important in nowadays market. And pipe dream is the stuff where, you know, if I had 1 year's worth of extra budget, or if I just had those 2 extra team members, then maybe I would implement this feature. Now you do something which I call the feasibility test. It's very simple. All it involves is just ask yourself a bunch of questions. And the questions are, do I have the budget for this concept? And by concept I mean the document that we already outlined. Right? Do I have the team for this? Sometimes, especially in indie studios, we don't have the exact team that we want for our project. If your game relies a lot on procedural generation, then you should probably focus more on programming. Right? Make a game that emphasizes the strengths of your team. If your team is full of storytellers and environment artists, don't focus on a mechanics heavy roguelike kind of a game. These are like common sense concepts, but when we're usually starting out and when we are making our first games, we sometimes overlook them. The third thing is, do I have the experience for this? Now by experience I mean knowledge and in general just the know-how to make something. Like if you plan on using, like let's say a Unity feature or an Unreal Engine feature, or if you want some cool shader tech in your game, do you actually know how to build that right now? Or are you thinking that, yeah, sure, I'll learn it along the way? Because that can change the development timeline for your game dramatically. If you're planning to learn stuff along the way, then your game is probably going to take a lot more time. And then there's time, which is obviously a very critical part. If you have to finish your game in 1 year, make sure you have something to show for in 1 year. Oftentimes, and even I was guilty of this when I was making my first prototypes, I would start out with an idea, then I would flesh out every part kind of at the same time, and I would end up with a game that was half finished in everything. But maybe instead, if I had focused and I had made a prototype that was polished mechanically, but not that polished art-wise, then I could have had something to show for, that I could have, maybe even sold on Steam, or I could have used it as a portfolio piece. It depends. So ask yourself these questions and be honest about it, right? Because a lot of the times when we estimate, we are kind of in the mindset that, yeah, you know what, I'll figure it out on the way. But that usually ends up adding time. That means that instead of 1 year, you're going to take 1 year and 3 months to finish a game. And sometimes, especially if you're running an indie studio like I am, that's not possible. So the next question you want to ask yourself is, can I quickly make a small prototype of my game? Because if you make a prototype, what you're essentially doing is you're conducting a small experiment about the feasibility of idea, let's say in a week or something like that. So it's not, you might not want to make a prototype, but honestly you probably should. Case in point, let's say you're planning that, okay, I'll go to Kickstarter for funding. So I made a game that I pitched on Kickstarter, and to do that, to make sure that my game reached its goal, I included a small demo. And several of the press and all the stuff that covered them, they clearly wrote to me and they said that, yeah, we covered your game compared to the other 500 Kickstarter pitches because you included a playable demo that was polished. Because having a playable demo is a proof. It proves to people that yes, you can make a more polished, more detailed version of this game. So imagine your prototyping exercise as a week-long game jam, right? If those of you who are indie and like college students and all that, you would be familiar with game jams. So think of your prototype as a week-long exercise where you have to start with the idea and end up with a finished prototype. Then get people to play test it. And this is something which I'll come back to later on as well. Getting feedback on your prototype itself is very important because it shows you the viability of your idea. If people don't react well to the prototype itself, then chances are you might need to go back to the drawing board, go back to the concept phase, figure out what works, what doesn't. And if you see any problems, see if you can fix them in the prototype stage itself. If you commission a bunch of assets and then in the finished game you find out that, okay, there's this interface problem, which is now hurting my review scores, or which makes the game incredibly frustrating to play, then it's much better if you fix those in the prototype phase itself. So now a roadmap, right? We usually, especially if you work in established teams, you build roadmaps, right? So ask yourself this, do you want to build a roadmap? Imagine if it was like the Frozen song, right? Do you want to build a roadmap, right? So the answer is yes, because building a roadmap makes you think about what you are putting in the game. It makes you think, okay, it's going to take me 1 month to finish the first, let's say the first major mechanics, then another 2 months to polish the rest, and then maybe I need 1 month for my inventory system, or maybe I can do it in 1 week. It depends. But a roadmap makes you think about what you're doing during the entire development process. And more importantly, it uses everybody's time efficiently. What I mean by this is, let's say we have a team of 3 people. 1 programmer, 1 game designer, 1 artist. It's the most basic team type, but a roadmap makes us think, okay, what's the artist doing while the game designer and programmer are busy implementing the fundamentals of the game. Because if you're a small team, you don't want your artists to waste time for 1 month, and then later on, once you guys are finished with the gameplay, you're immediately piling on all the work. Like, hey, I need 3 models, I need 5 animations, and the interface, who's going to do the interface? So make sure you use everybody's time to the fullest extent. So how to build a roadmap? You break your design down to the smallest chunk possible. So hopefully we already have a basic framework for this in our previous concept exercise. So then what we do is we take a look at, okay, how much time is it going to take for me to implement the two categories, essentials and nice to have? Because pipe dream, that was a trick category actually. Whatever you put in pipe dream, basically say that yeah, that's for the sequel if this game is successful. So once you do that and you have your estimate, be honest with yourself and double that required time. Especially if you are starting out. If you already have, let's say if you've made like 5 endless runner and this is your 6th, then maybe your estimate is going to be accurate. But if this is your first game or even your second or third game, then you want to make sure you have inbuilt time for when you're not going to be able to implement the feature in the deadline that you set for yourself. And then do the feasibility test, ask yourself those questions, right? And if you say that yes, this game is passing the feasibility test, as in I have the time, money, budget, motivation, experience to do this, then you can go ahead. Otherwise, cut some features and try this feasibility test again. Because crucially, teams, what they end up doing is they cut features towards the end, where it's the worst time to start cutting. Instead, what you should do is start cutting features right at the prototyping and like as soon as you start making them. Because in case your design needs to change, in case you need to adapt your design to fit this new feature set that you have, then you can do that with time remaining. Now we come to production, which is the part where we sit down and make the game, right? So I have this principle which I have used for all throughout my development since 2009 and which has worked out very well for me, and it's a very simple thing. It's called the working build principle, and all that means is that you should always have a working build of your game. So if you're committing something to version control, make it so that it doesn't break the build for the next week. Always have a working build of your game. Why? Because the first thing is, if you're a small size studio, your game is the best tool for promoting itself. You probably don't have enough money for a marketing campaign or to commission some concept art or a CGI trailer like Blizzard does, right? So your game is the best tool for promotion, and you never know when an opportunity like that might arise. So I'll touch upon this later, but when you're an indie developer, often chances for promotion come up unexpectedly. Like maybe, let's say an example, let's say a website is doing an article about games set in India, right? And they have a deadline of next week. So you go to rockpapershotgun.com or something, you look at that and you see, oh yeah, I should, send my game to this person. But they're not going to wait 6 months until you have your polished build ready and working. So if you have a build, you can always promote your game using that build. So if there is one thing that you want to do as an indie developer, it's to always have a working build of your game. Then the next part is, as you are slowly developing your game, you're moving through stages and all that, you should set milestones for yourself, which is basically short goals that you meet and they provide a bunch of victories for your team. So being motivated is key when you're making a game for yourself. Motivation is especially important for indie developers because often you don't have money and motivation is everything you have. So you want to make sure that you keep getting those victories. Oh yeah, I just implemented this major feature, yes. So you feel motivated to see the game through to its conclusion, right? And generally speaking, if a feature that you think is going to take 15 days to implement, it's going to take 20 days. Maybe it's going to take 25. Very rarely are you going to, have a big breakthrough and end up implementing it in 7 days. So always have inbuilt catch-up time. Because if you actually do stuff on time, then it allows you to take a breather You don't want to constantly be crunching throughout the entire development process. So have inbuilt catch-up time for your milestones. And then you can use some tools to help you out with this stuff. So Google Docs is a simple tool, it's available to everyone. For all of my games, I have used Google Docs to communicate with artists. So you can use Trello and all that for programmers and stuff, but generally artists have a very different kind of mind. It's not good or bad, you need that kind of artistic mind. But generally artists don't like to fiddle around with tools. They want to they have a vision and they want to execute it. So for that, even those guys can type words on Google. Because you can use Google Docs to make asset lists, to lay out a quick roadmap or stuff. And if you are heavy on the tech side, you can use Trello. Trello is a very, if you've seen the Unreal Engine Trello, they basically have a series of, you can essentially design sprints and stuff on that. It's more technical than Google Docs. So use either of these are very good. And the third part is version control. Because I still meet indie developers who in 2017 are still not using version control. And by version control, I mean, Git, Mercurial, Perforce, whatever have you. So please use version control because it helps you undo whatever mess you make, which you will eventually end up making. So version control is incredibly important. There are 5-minute tutorials for non-technical people out on Google. Please, go type version control on Google tutorial to get and start using it. Because that's going to help you out a lot in the long run. And then we have this thing called playtesting, which a lot of you might think happens right at the end. It's like, oh yeah, I have this game, I'm going to send it off to QA, and then if they don't find enough bugs, fine, just ship it. But that's not the best way to do playtesting. Because what you should do is that you should be playtesting your game every single day. As soon as you have a playable build, you should be playtesting it. Have your team play the game. Even if some of your team say that let's say, for example, your artist says that the type of game that you're making is not their type of game. I don't like to play these kind of games. But still have them play it. Because their feedback is almost as valuable as somebody who is a fan of the genre. So, I'll give you an example. So, role-playing games are generally famous for having obtuse and completely uninteresting interfaces. Like the inventory for an RPG is you click on it and it's gonna take 1 second to load up, and then the journal will be an incomprehensible wall of text. So what I did was, I had one person on my team who did not play RPGs at all. They were like, what, I don't like this talking dialogue box nonsense. I'm just here to do art. So just let me do art. So I was like, no, play the game, try to play the game and let me know what you think about this game. What parts do you not like? So turns out that their entire problem with the game was related to the interface. They were having a hard time figuring out where they were in the story. If you load a game after playing it for, let's say, a month or so, you have this moment where you're like, what was I doing? So that was, they were experiencing that problem, but in a more smaller time scale. So what I did was, I included a feature where you have this recap feature in the game, where you look at a journal entry and it just tells you, okay, here's what has happened so far. It took me roughly about 2 or 3 days to implement that. And after that, I actually started getting story feedback from the artist. They were like, what, I don't like this part of the story, maybe this character should say something like this, and a lot of other feedback. So it turns out that this person was ignoring an entire genre just because it had a few minor interface elements that made it incredibly difficult for them to remember where they were. So small things like this, you will discover them. Especially if you get somebody who does not play those kind of games to playtest your game. So listening to feedback is essentially important. So another thing which I want to emphasize is, often when somebody gives you a playtest report, right, and they say, oh no, I didn't like this, our first instinct is to say, oh no, but this is this was my intention. I wanted to do this, that's why this element is like this, right? Let's say a rough example, somebody says that, health packs are incredibly difficult to find in your game because they are yellow in color. I expected them to be red or green, something like that. And you're like, oh no, but the blood of my character is like in the story, it actually explains that the blood is yellow, and no. Nobody cares. Your game should be explaining that. This is something which I constantly tell my students, is that you're not going to go to every single person who buys your game and stand behind their shoulder and explain your design decisions to them, right? So you want your game to do that explaining. And this is the kind of feedback which we usually ignore in playtesting. But if we just listen, then we'll find out these things and we'll iron out these things before it lands up on a reviewer, right? So the next part is polish, which is usually the part we end up ignoring because we don't have enough time. So just ask yourself these few questions, like I already just told you. Is the game accessible to somebody who doesn't play those kind of games? Maybe somebody is going to play it on like a 5-year-old computer or something. If you can help it, why not have your game run on that? This involves some optimization and like some technical stuff. So, but this is something you have to keep in mind, because usually we developers have the state-of-the-art hardware or something, or at least good enough computers, and we ignore that a lot of the times people are going to play this game on a 1024x600 screen while they're on a train where they have no internet. So make sure your game works even in those scenarios. And another part which is related to promotion is that nowadays YouTube and Twitch are a very important means to promoting your game. And sometimes the tech that you use makes it difficult for somebody to record footage of your game or stream it. So make sure you test it out first. Use all common recording software. Make sure that you can make trailers of your game. You can make a gameplay demo of your game using that. And then post-production. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but just a few tips about promotion. So don't wait until launch is the first thing. If you have a game that's gonna come out in 3 months, start promoting. And the way you do that is usually almost all of your, if you have a zero budget, as is the case with a lot of studios, you first do market research. You're like, okay, what YouTubers, what review sites like games like this, right? And then you send them review keys, you personalize your emails, because usually when when a reviewer or a YouTuber gets an email from a big studio, it's going to be templated, right? It's immediately clear that this email was sent to 500 people all at once. But you as an indie developer, you cannot match their marketing. But what you can do is personally reach out to the reviewer. So if you have something like, what this reviewer likes, like, hey, I know you like StarCraft, maybe you like this RTS that I made. Just something like this can help your game stand out a lot. And there is no universal approach to this, so feel free to be creative with your promotion. And then support. So by that I mean tech support. So what happens is that when we set out to make our game, we ignore the fact that we will have a lot of bugs in the game, especially right after launch, when suddenly thousands of people are going to play our game, hopefully. So no matter how much you playtest within your team, there are going to be bugs. Now what you can do is you can set aside some time. What I usually prefer is having at least 2 months set aside for post-release support, because oftentimes your first couple of weeks after launch are just going to be spent fixing the absolute worst kind of bugs where people are losing their saves and the game is crashing and all that sort of stuff. But make sure you account for that stuff in your development schedule. And then once you are finished, then you can go on vacation. But it's going to take at least say 2 months for fixing all the bugs and the minor inconveniences that occur in your game. And before I finish this talk, just a small disclaimer that this talk basically had a bunch of principles that worked for me. It was not under a unified process, this is not Arvind's unified process for indie development. So feel free to take stuff piecemeal. Maybe something that works for you, feel free to just steal it from this talk. and your game and team might be different. So don't, at the same time, don't follow a process mindlessly. Figure out how this process helps, for you to finish your game. And if you want to be an indie developer for more than 4 hours, please consult a doctor, because it's not a viable profession. Be lawyers or something. So yeah. And one other thing is that, in addition to all of this, account for motivation. Motivation is an important currency when you're making an indie game, when you're running your own company. So don't burn yourself out. If you think that your schedule is going to lead to a burnt out you 6 months from now, foresee this problem, try to avoid it the best if possible. And that's it. So if you have any questions.
Where you're not satisfied with the core mechanic of your game, but you had to playtest it or give it to someone to playtest. Is there a context where that is acceptable?
So yeah, usually that happens to me a lot when I'm prototyping early on. Like an example would be making sure to, so I'll give you an example. So when I was prototyping on Rest, people were having a lot of time figuring out which of these characters are interactable, which ones can I talk to right now, which ones I can. So this to me was I looked at this feedback, I got it, and I realized that it was a twofold problem. One, it was a problem with the art. The foreground and the background were very similar. But at the same time, I also implemented a very simple outline and icon over the head of characters. This is something which is already present in a lot of games, but I had not thought of this.
But so I was asking in the context that you're aware of a certain problem in the game, but you're still able to playtest for someone.
But when giving it for playtest, do you mean to the team, or I released it
someone new to get some feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I used to do that a lot, because I used to see, is this problem as big as I think it is? It's almost always valuable to have somebody playtest your game, no matter what stage you're at.
Okay. Thank you.
The UI problems and the quests where you just how do you differentiate in a situation like that between a feature that's good for your target audience versus a feature that's good for this one person on your team that doesn't know RPGs and maybe doesn't represent your sales?
Well, in that specific case, what I did was, then once I got that feedback, right, I went and I specifically seeked out people who did not play RPGs. I went and got them to play the game, and a bunch of other people echoed similar concerns. So in general, yeah, if there is just one outlying instance of some feedback, it's worth it to get a second opinion. But I usually end up relying on my designer sense to figure out, can I solve, and especially if it's a problem that doesn't negatively hamper the rest of the game, it's not negatively affecting how my target audience is perceiving that game, then I usually see no reason to implement it, provided I have the time and budget for it, of course. So.
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm single indie developer, and you said that finishing your game, you submitted to publishers or for the reviews, okay. So if we submit our game to Steam, so after that, should we continue making another game, or should we focus on marketing it, or and if we focus on marketing, how much time should we take?
That's there's no real universal answer to that. What I would say is that if you just submitted your game to Steam, that means that Steam is gonna have a review process before they publish it. By that time, you should be full into promoting your current game, which you're about to release. And once the game launches and you have 1 or 2 weeks worth of data, at that point you'll know if it's worth it to have additional content for your game. Have maybe, do I want to work on DLC for this, or do I want to abandon this project and work on something else? So that is only really that question is only answered depending on data. There's no real universal answer to that. So what I would say is that just look at data that you get after you release your game on Steam. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm a novice in game design, and what I'm facing right now, which I got to know as game lingo, is feature creep. It's like you work on something and you're in like pretty much into the stage, you've done your playtesting and then you realize that, oh my god, why didn't I think of that? And that would make the game so much better. And then you go into that and it just keeps, so when do you stop, or do you stop, or how do you?
Well, so usually what I ended up doing if I had new ideas for like features and whatnot is that I talked about the concept document early on. So I used to like codify a feature, like okay, let's type it out in our document and figure out where this fits. Is this essential? Would this feature be nice to have, or am I just like, sometimes what happens is I would used to play a very cool game and I would say, you know what, I want this feature in my game. Even though I was like 6 months into making this game and there was no way I could have ever like completed the game in the same time frame. So I mean, usually the answer to feature creep is don't add new features to your game. It's the easiest thing to do, like don't work. It's the best kind of thing. So
I mean, even if it's a really great idea and it's good.
yeah, but usually I always have this axe handed, like a bulletin. You have an axe over your head, and that axe is the deadline. If I don't release a game, I used to set out release dates much in advance. I would be like, if I don't release this game on July of 2014, then I don't have enough money to continue running my studio. So that's how I used to stop myself from adding new features. But I mean, that's the thing which comes with practice. I think just like you get better at denying yourself extra features. So
Thank you.
Me and my friend were making games right here. So what we found out is right now we have completed our game. We're almost there for release now. So now we figured out there's an error. It's not it's not going to kill us or anything. So we made a mistake with colliders. Now we have triggers instead of like normal collision. The issue with this is that it's not game breaking, but it will certainly be much better if we make this change. However, this might delay our release date like even further. So what do you think we should do?
I mean, it really depends on what I would generally say. If you have a marketing plan in place, don't delay your release, and like start working on this thing and just put it like post launch, have a patch that includes this. But honestly, it's very difficult to say one way or another because like I don't know what your team is doing and how much time it's going to take.
So it's two hours, we're two guys. So we just have a small issue, like it's aesthetic more than anything. So is it worth releasing and then fixing it, or should we fix it and then release it? Because it might take some time. It's not game breaking.
I mean, at a just like off the cuff, I would say release it then fix it. But I mean, it really depends on your game. It's like, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This is kind of akin to asking a doctor, like oh hey, what should I do? I have this blood that's coming out of my shoulder. What should I do? So it's hard for me to give you a definitive answer over here, but definitely. Like in general, I would say release it and then fix it. Yeah.
Thank you.